Welcome to Rethinking Communication. I'm your host, Michael Ashford. Come with me on a journey as I explore how we better connect with each other through the power of our words. For most of us, formal education left gaps in our ability to communicate well with each other, especially when trying to navigate conflict, inspire change, and overcome misunderstandings. I'm a former journalist, a speaking coach, and a communication expert, and my goal is to encourage you to rethink what it means to be an effective communicator, from the stage to the meeting room to the living room and everywhere in between. Hello, friend. Welcome back to the podcast, Rethinking Communication. We are on part 4 of my 6-part series, The Communication Skills to Improve in the Age of AI. I hope you've enjoyed this series so far. I've enjoyed putting it together for you, and I hope it's been helpful, informative, perhaps a little educational for you as we get through this series. My whole thing is I want to teach you how to communicate in ways that school never taught you, and I hope I'm accomplishing a little bit of that as we go through this 6-part series. The last episode 3, or skill number 3, was asking questions. Jump back and listen to the first few episodes of this 6-part series, and then come back to this one where we're going to be talking about how to stay present and observant. It is a skill. It is something that you can train yourself in. I'm going to cover that here in this episode. Before I get into this episode, one of the things that I'm excited to do more of in 2026 and beyond is to work more with teams at companies in particular, teams of leaders, whether they're in-place executive teams or teams of new leaders. That's an area where I tend to gravitate towards and specialize because, again, a lot of communication skills as it relates to the workplace, it's on-the-job training. It's not something that a lot of programs are put into place. A lot of training programs are put into place to tackle how do you communicate when you get promoted to a new leadership role or when you become a new leader at a new company. How do you build trust? How do you bridge gaps and divides across teams? How do you inspire change out of the situation that you're in? This is something that my training, my workshops for leadership groups in particular and leadership teams, this can help. And so if you are interested in bringing me into your company to hold a communication training for a team or a group, go check out the link in the show notes or visit my website, michaelashford.com, and click the link up at the top that says for teams and find out all the information there. And if you want to, reach out and let's talk about it. Okay, let's get into part 4 of this 6-part series, The Communication Skills to Improve in the Age of AI. This episode, Staying Present and Observant. One evening earlier this year, my family and I had just finished dinner, and we had harvest bowls. It's one of our favorite meals. It's rice and oven-roasted chicken and root vegetables like potatoes and parsnips and carrots, of course, toasted sunflower seeds, toasted pumpkin seeds, goat cheese. Like I said, it's one of our favorite meals. Absolutely delicious. Anywho, it was my son's night to clean the kitchen, so he was loading the dishwasher while my wife and my daughter and I were still sitting at the dinner table. The 4 of us were talking about the various teachers we've had at school and all of their quirks. And I don't really remember how we got on the subject, but we were laughing and we were remembering things that we hadn't thought about in years. My kids from their early elementary school days, my wife and I from high school and middle school, 20 plus years ago now. And as we were talking, the moment struck me as being deeply important. Not because of the topic of our conversation. We could have really honestly been talking about anything. But more importantly, I was so happy that our 2 teenage children were just hanging out with their mom and dad, no cell phones, no computers, no TV. They were just talking to us about life and their world, and they were interested in ours. It was the kind of moment that exemplifies the 4th skill you need to master in the age of AI, being present and observant. Listen, few people realize just how important being present and observant are to being an effective communicator and just how little of it we're doing these days. The more present you are, the more you commit yourself to keeping your focus and your thoughts grounded in the moment taking place right in front of you, the more apt you are to notice things going on around you, words that are said or unsaid, and emotions that may be just below the surface that are unvoiced. And all of those little data points are information-rich fertilizer for effective communication. This is true as a parent, as a spouse or a partner, as a leader, as an employee, as a friend, literally just as a person in general. But it is so difficult to be present these days. And that may sound like a cliche, but it is absolutely true. You have so much vying for your attention at any given moment in time. You have that email that you have to respond to. Oh, that DM just pinged you on your phone. The conversation you had last night with your spouse is still running around in your head. The upcoming lunch get-together with your friends that's on your calendar that you've got to plan for and you got to make a reservation for. The couple of items that you need to remember to pick up from the grocery store on your way home from work. Your attention is one of the most precious resources that you have. And there is no shortage of apps, devices, notifications, thoughts, people trying to gain as much of your attention as possible. And it's not lost on me. You're listening to a podcast that is probably drawing your attention away from something else. I understand the irony of that. But much of what grabs your attention these days is likely a diversion from what's most important, especially that which lies right in front of you in the moment that you're in. And as it relates to AI cannot be present in the same way that you can. It simply cannot experience the world in the way that you can, and it cannot notice the things that you notice or that you are able to notice if you pay attention to it. The conversation with my kids and my wife after dinner that I described earlier was about so much more than our former teachers and their odd tendencies. In being present with my family and noticing the moment, I learned more about what they notice in others, my wife and my kids, about what they find funny and about what they remember as being important or noteworthy in their lives. And they, same with me. And knowing all of that, even just in that little moment after dinner on a random weekday night, those things make me a better communicator with them because I now know them just a little bit better. In the same way, being more present and observant helps you get better at the other skills I've covered so far. Storytelling, being able to think on the fly, asking questions. I covered all of those. I covered being present and observant in some way, shape, or form in all of those. How can you storytell if you're not paying attention to the real world around you in a more observant way? So that you notice the elements that make a story more captivating, or you notice the stories as they're happening. You can't. And so you end up with a generic story that literally anyone could produce, sort of like what you get from AI. How can you turn those observations into in-the-moment thoughts or questions that help you understand the person across from you in a deeper, more meaningful way because you ask something that's relevant right there to the moment about what you're noticing? If you're not fully invested in the setting that you're in, with the people who are with you, it becomes impossible. You can't. And so you end up having to make generalized assumptions about people and what they care about. Again, sort of like what you get from AI. Your attention is something AI cannot replicate or duplicate, but AI is surely trying to get you to outsource this more present way of showing up. And so I challenge you to practice being more present. Notice more of what's going on around you and use that as fuel for your communication, richer, fuller communication. This past October 2025, the leadership team of which I'm a part of at the company where I work, we were up in Breckenridge, Colorado at a leadership retreat in an Airbnb, and we were having all day meetings in this big open space right there in the middle of the Airbnb cabin. And I kept noticing that our director of customer experience kept getting interrupted. She kept getting talked over. Her words kept getting cut short as other people would pile on and take the conversation in a different direction. And every time I noticed this, I stopped the room and said, "Hold on, she was still speaking. Hold on. Let her finish her thought. Hold on. Can we not interrupt here? I probably did that 4 or 5, maybe 6 times over the course of a couple days worth of meetings. And as we were packing up and getting ready to leave on the final day that we were there, our director of CX came up to me and she said, "Hey, I just wanted to thank you for how many times you stood up for me when I was being interrupted. I noticed that you did that, and it really means a lot to me. Thank you." That is a moment of communication effectiveness that just, it gives me goosebumps, even as I'm telling the story right now, because what happened in that moment was our director of CX and I shared a moment of shared understanding where we now more effectively can communicate with each other because we understand what's important to each other, how the other one feels. We can notice and call out things more in each other and in others because we've given each other the communicative permission, I'll say, by being present and observant, by noticing what was happening in the moment and doing something about it. So in meetings and perhaps in conversations, yeah, like I said in the storytelling episode, way back in episode or part 1 of this series, you can write down your observations. You can make note of unspoken emotions that you notice, but you don't have to do those things. In the storytelling series or the storytelling episode, I talked about how you could be a collector of stories and how you can write down those things, those moments throughout your day that stand out to you that you could perhaps use as a story down the road or as an example of something. But even then, you don't have to do that when you're talking about being present and observant in the moment. When you set your laptop aside and stop taking notes on your laptop and instead decide to write them down, which, by the way, studies show far more effective way to capture and retain information than typing it out. But when you can set your phone aside, when you can look at the person who is speaking rather than at the slides on the screen that they're presenting, when you can do your best to ignore the little notification that pops up on your smartwatch and just pay attention to what's happening, what's being said, the words, the tone, the language, both the spoken and the body language, all of that stuff, that allows you to call those things forward, to give voice to those things in the moment where it becomes far more meaningful. That can lead to more questions, more relevant and poignant and introspective questions that call out dialogue from others. When you can notice what is being said and unsaid and ask to bring it forward. When you pay attention to the answers so that you can ask coherent and thoughtful follow-up questions that you get to your initial or original question. You must be intentional. If you want to get better at this skill of being present and observant, you must be intentional about doing exactly that. And it's going to feel difficult because setting aside your computer at work or setting aside your phone, putting it in your pocket and not pulling it out when every little buzz or notification gives you that little tap on the shoulder, hey, pay attention to me over here. There's an intentionality that you can train yourself to practice being observant, noticing things. If your attention starts to wander, notice it. Silently call it out to yourself and bring yourself back to the moment that you're in. This is a practice in meditation and in yoga that I've noticed. They talk about, hey, being present with your thoughts right there in the moment. And when you feel yourself start to wander, when you feel your mind all of a sudden starting to think about, oh, did I make that doctor's appointment for my kid? Oh my gosh, did I schedule that meeting with Joe or Jan? Just call it out. Say, hey, I'm not focusing on that right now, right here in front of me. What am I doing? Bring yourself back to the moment that you're in. Keep a checklist of to-do items as you go through the meeting. And again, write them down so that your focus isn't constantly hijacked by simply trying to remember the things that you have to get done. When you have something that you need to get done, write it down, come back to the present. Presence actually is my word of the year for 2026. It is joined with a phrase that I am been finding myself repeating quite often, which is control what you can control. I wrote about both of these topics in recent newsletters, both my word of the year, presence, and the communicative idea of controlling what you can control and how you can more effectively show up in relationships, in meetings, as an employee, as a leader, when you focus on what's in front of you, the things that you can control. And as it relates specifically to this topic of presence and being observant, you can control your attention, but you must be intentional about wanting to even do so. It will take effort to train yourself to get better at shutting out all that vies for your attention these days, but the resulting strengths, the resulting communicative muscle that you gain will produce better conversations. And those better conversations will produce better results for everyone involved. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the 6-part series on the communication skills you should look to improve in the age of AI. This has been part 4. Stay tuned for the next episode when I go through skill number 5, which is pausing before you respond or before you speak. That's a big one, every bit as much so as these past 4 have been, but we're trying to stack skills here, okay? So join me next week when I bring you the 5th part of this 6-part series. And until then, keep asking questions.